Hey, Mackey's back in town. Here to talk some more about the infamous Count Dante and Chicago Dojo Wars. Today, I'm planning on actually focusing on the Black Dragon Society itself, which is kind of the apex of all the publicity and media. Pardon me, but I'm new to this, and I'm trying to just get myself in the camera the right way without getting a leg cramp at the same time. Anyway, I also have some notes over here, so you might see me glance over once in a while because I want to try to be accurate. So let's just jump into it. The Black Dragon Society, the infamous Black Dragon Society. Yes, all the ads that you saw in the back of comic books where they were teaching the Death Touch, Jim Mock, and this guy with a pointy beard and had his hands in some ominous position that looked like he was ready to claw your eyes out, and he was deemed himself as the deadliest man alive. Well, that was Count Dante aka John Kean, who, as I mentioned last time, was the owner and of the World Karate Federation, and also the promoter of many controversial full contact, supposedly full contact tournaments. I don't really believe they were. And I want to try to explain how the Black Dragon Society morphed itself from the World Karate Federation. Excuse me. I'm still preoccupied with trying to get myself to look cool. I'm sorry. Anyway, so what happened was right around the time, again, you can debate me. I could be wrong on some of these facts, but it's the process that's more important than the content in this whole series of presentations. I hope you keep that in mind. The whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. So some of my parts may be a little bit inaccurate, but the whole picture is what tells the story, I think. So with that in mind, again, after John Kean changed his name to Count Dante, there was a period, I think, when he was still, associated with the World Karate Federation. But then, very quickly thereafter, you started to see comic book ads about, really, in the back of comic books about, the world's most deadliest man alive, and teaches the Dim Mak Death Touch and all this kind of stuff. And for $1, you could learn all these secrets. And this is while I believe he was with the W.K.F. And when he donned himself Count Dante, he had to change, where he came from. And so no longer was he like, kind of an average Chicago karate teacher that had a cheesy school, but he now became this, mysterious character. And at that time, the Black Dragon Society evolved. And they were basically students that were from the WWF. They just changed over. Whether there was some kind of ritual or some fancy schmancy thing they did, who knows? But they were basically the same students, okay? They just started wearing black sweatpants and a black sweatshirt and gym shoes instead of, those kooky blue uniforms. So... anyhow, he moved into the comic book thing, and I hear he sold 1 million comic books. So it was just a scam, really. Then he really did a very brilliant thing, which is done by many power-hungry, unfortunately negative political leaders. And that was that he marketed himself to being a... ethnic karate school. In other words, he didn't discriminate against racial boundaries. Well, you know what I mean. He didn't discriminate against races. And of course, that included the black community. And, somewhere around that time, there was all that Martin Luther King stuff going on at the same time. So it was a real smart move to start liking blacks. I hate to say it like that. I mean, I didn't like him for that reason, but I think he did because he was a South Sider Irish guy who just typically wouldn't be the kind of guy who would have some great, attraction or interest in the black community. Either he wanted to make money off more students, or he wanted to take control of an underprivileged population. Okay, I want to say that again. Maybe he wanted to take control of an underprivileged population that was looking for some answers of some kind, and he took advantage of that in the form of getting them to follow him and gaining power and false sense of self-esteem by being the leader of a karate organization. But it got its roots by, starting to develop a relationship with Jim Jones, who was, the Black Boy Friday the Black Gentleman Friday of, karate on the south side of Chicago. And he made friends with him, and he took in all of his black students. And, that's a famous ploy. I don't need to go into who else has used it, but, preying on the underprivileged to, under the veil of it being, a racial equal opportunity school, is just ludicrous, knowing this man's history and where he's come from. So he also, like I said, he used this thing to gather followers. So now he had his own students, plus those of the black community that he already had recruited, plus more that he recruited during the spirit of the times, that black equality was very important to the American culture. You follow? So the spirit of the times and what John Keane was doing by being such an anti-racist was really, I think, self-serving in the development of this thing called the Black Dragon Society. Now, during this period where this organization was developing, several things were also happening simultaneously. And that was that John Keane started to be John Keane again, and not some dude named Count Dante. And I say that because what he started to do, just to be brief about it, is, first of all, this is the most ridiculous thing. If I'm wrong, it really doesn't even matter. But I seem to believe that the school, he was accused of trying to bomb another dojo. Now, many of you have probably heard that. But what I don't think you heard was that the school he tried to bomb was the same school that beat the crap out of him in a dojo war and killed one of his followers, okay? He actually had a gripe going with this school and probably wanted to blow up the dojo instead of having a face-off match. But I don't know what happened. I think he got caught. He was caught with a can of gasoline and matches. And somehow, this is Chicago, let's face it again, something got fixed. And he went on his merry way. But he ended up trying to bomb and got caught for the place that ended up beating the crap out of him shortly thereafter, okay? Second of all, by now, Count Dante was also known for abusing quite a bit of drugs. And if you talk to his followers, most people, make that typical excuse of a powerful leader, which say things like, special people deserve special exceptions, or special people deserve special recreations, or, all these excuses that lead to, cult leaders sexually abusing their members. I think John Keane's followers, still to this day, tend to minimize the fact that the guy was a terrible drug abuser, especially with prescription painkillers. Do you hear that? Vicodin. That's the stuff they're talking about nowadays. Well, this is back in, I don't know, probably the mid to late 60s, and he was using Vicodin then. And, I don't mean to go off on a tangent again, but the man died allegedly of some kind of bleeding, GI bleeding or something. But you know what? If you're taking too much Vicodin, it has a lot of acetaminophen in it. And if you take too much of it, it's going to start to give you ulcers. And if it starts to give you ulcers, you're going to bleed to death, possibly, especially if you're not paying attention to it because you realize you're a drug addict and don't want to admit that to anybody. So let's just mention at the same time that the Black Dragon Fighting Society was growing, and he was preying on the underprivileged and gaining a followership. One, he tried to start another place on fire, another dojo. And two, Two, well, let's just review. He also was a known drug abuser that people tend to minimize. And three, he was also involved at some point in time, I think somewhere around here, that he was arrested in conjunction with some sort of like major robbery, where like tens of thousands of dollars were stolen, and that was supposedly disappeared into Nowhereville, like so many things in my kind of town happens. And finally, what ended up being his ultimate, I think, demise, even though people still seem to minimize or justify it, was his acting out by having these dojo wars, plural, wars. It wasn't just one fight. As I mentioned in my last video, I was witness to one that he started at my school. And he was doing it all over, and he was gaining this crazy reputation, and people were just justifying it the same way that when you're a teenager in high school, and everybody seems to be pals with the guy that has this cruel tendency of picking on somebody, but the reason they're really friends with him is not because they like him, it's because they're afraid of being picked on themselves. And that was like John Keane's social structure, in my opinion, in terms of all the people who knew they were dealing with a nut and probably were involved in some way, in some illegal ways. This is just my theory now. But this acting out that I described was going on at the same time that the Black Dragon Society was developing as an organization and transformed itself from the World Karate Federation. And also, besides the drug abuse and the robbery accusations and the bombing of the same dojo they had to fight with, it ended up with the dojo wars. And that is to be continued at my next video. Thank you so much for listening. Namaste.